from SEO to international SEO. And I've also had the privilege to work with Bill on multiple accounts over the years and consider him a true friend and mentor. He's one of the nicest people I know, and I'm bringing all of this together, not just to build him up for his last presentation, but this is also going to be Bill's last official presentation on SEO, as he's not hanging up his hat just yet, but he's moving forward into data leadership positions with some of the core companies that he's worked with over the years, right? So as Bill makes that transition, I thought this was the ultimate time to take this conversation throughout the entire day and apply it to Bill's keynote, his happy hour keynote. Because as we know, Bill's worked a lot in the spirits industry. So we're ending today's eSummit with a happy hour keynote from Bill Hunt. Bill is the founder and president of Back Azimuth, a company that does data-driven SEO, international SEO, and all kinds of other consulting. You can find him on Twitter at Bill Hunt. And now, I've talked enough. Let's let Bill get started. Bill's presentation on his keynote today, his final keynote in the world of SEO, is going to be on pivoting for opportunities in the new normal. So let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining my session on pivoting to the new normal. Crazy times right now with COVID-19 culminated with us attending this amazing conference online, hearing about how Google is rendering JavaScript sites, eat structured data, an amazing session on integrating search and social, and even some technical SEO asshattery, and some of the interesting things that come out of technical audits and technical SEO. I have to say this is probably the hardest presentation to try to record it and get it ready for you. I think this is the 12th take, and technology is awesome. I'm Bill Hunt, and I've been doing search in that for probably 26 years now. My original business school thesis was using the internet to reach overseas markets. I built and sold a couple search and digital agencies over the years. Now I focus on enterprise centers of excellence, so trying to use global search to help companies and how to organize for that. Bunch of big companies. I was originally the global head of SEO or search in general for IBM. I've worked with P&G, Hewlett-Packard, Absolute Vodka, number of other big companies. So I've sort of been there, done that, seen a lot of things, and a lot of these that I'm going to talk about today is sort of derived out of these companies and what they demand from their vendors and their people. Three things we're going to talk about. Number one, always show them the money. One of the big challenges people have had is sort of clients got to decide where to spend the money. And, you know, the last place you want to be is, you know, having a client call you and tell you that they got to cut you loose because they didn't feel the value. You know, if they got to feed the family, got to feed the team, that makes sense, but should never be because you didn't deliver value. The other thing coming out of this is pivots. A lot of companies, including my own, we've had to rethink how we're going to do stuff and what we want to do and why we want to do it going forward. And then lastly, thinking globally. There's a massive amount of opportunity outside the US that's just waiting to be picked up. And we're going to talk about how some ways to think about and what the future is for doing that. So, you know, we can't talk about business value unless we have the Jerry Maguire "show me the money" quote. And I mentioned that not because it's just literally about showing me the money, but the conversation that the athlete was having with the agent. No, look, you're here for me. Your job is to get me the best deal possible. And we intuitively think like that the agent's going to work hard because the better deal he gets you, the more money he or she makes. You know, I had one of these sort of Jerry Maguire moments with a client where I got a call one day, and that's actually what he said was, "I'm not feeling love." and I need to come up and talk to you about it. Now, this client had never been to our office before. And actually, the only people ever came to our office was people that wanted to go golfing on some of the amazing golf courses in Central Oregon. But he came up, and I wanted to use it as a learning experience for the agency. So we got the entire company together, let him talk about what we did well, what we did poorly. And the epiphany moment that came out of it is he said, look, your only job is to deliver results that keeps my ass employed. And the bottom line, that's true. We were a tool in his toolbox. As the global head of search for a multinational company, we were a key part of making him successful. And in the end of the day, we had a workshop, and what we wanted to come out of that workshop was a report, that Keep My Ass Employed report. And it's actually called the Keyword Maximization and Effectiveness Report. So we needed something to say in case management asked us about it. But the KMEA report really showed one thing: how much business value we were delivering. And so our number one goal, like, they could care less how many words were ranking number one, what words were ranking number, even how much traffic we drove. It was how much revenue. And that was the number one metric that was on here, is natural search revenue. And as you can see, once we got our act together and really started delivering on his key KPI, then within 23 weeks, or week 23 of the year, we had hit 116% of the year-to-date goal attainment. Now, it's pretty hard to come and tell the agency, hey, we got to cut you loose, you're not working hard for us, when you've achieved 116% of the goal. And we got here by really, really focusing on what moved the needle, what words, what pages, what was actually going to convert people. And in the end, what it was, this 25% increase in natural search traffic actually increased SEO revenue by 45%. And by focusing on really what moved the needle, that was the key value that we were able to derive from this. And this idea of economic value is a fancy way of saying people have money to spend and they can pay for your solution, or given that there's other things they can do. So do I spend money on SEO? Do I do paid search? Do I do paid social? What do I give as a bonus for salespeople for actually going out and dialing up people and selling it? And that's how we need to think. And we often think of this as sort of true monetary value, where we give you a list of things that we're going to do for you, and there's a price associated with that. Well, in a client's mind, this is translated into perceived value. All those things you're going to do for me at the end of the day are going to do nothing but drive the traffic that's going to ring the cash register. And this idea of perceived value is really what we have to focus on. And another one of these epiphany moments for me, I was doing an advisory service or helping a company build out a fairly large SEO team. They had built websites for about 16,000 businesses, and 50-60% did not renew year over year. And when we drilled into that why, one of the things that we found, the whole list of reasons why, but in a nutshell, it really distilled down to they thought the website that they had bought would perform well in Google, basically bring them free leads. That's what it boiled down to. Yes, they paid for an SEO program. Yes, they paid for paid search. Yes, they paid for link building. They paid for all these things. But at the end of the day, the site itself, and I think there was like 30-40 of them actually said, we assumed somebody that could sell us an SEO package could build a website that could be SEO friendly and derive value from Google. So no matter what they said, they could show the client all day long that they paid for X, but the client's mind was that there was some other value that was tied to that. And that's why you want to really think about this idea of value creation. What are you doing for the client? And this is an example of a project where when we kicked it off, the stereotypical project, you do all the keyword work, you do an audit, you tell them what's wrong, you go in and you, over the next X amount of time, try to fix the things that are wrong. And, if you look at the dates, we'll see this was coming into sort of the COVID window, and everybody was panicked and said, look, why don't we put all the normal stuff aside and just try to fix stuff? And so we went in, we started fixing errors, we started fixing snippets, we're doing things that we could actually tie back to a goal. And as you can see, we hit 173% increase over the previous year by doing the things that would actually move the needle. Yes, long term, the audit found many other things that are going to take a long time, as much as a year, to get into their roadmap to get fixed. But to deliver this much traffic, and like I said before, traffic doesn't necessarily matter. So we looked at the other two goals. Now you notice that we had a declining on the left. These were subscriptions, plain and simple. We weren't delivering people that were going to sign up. It was a hard target. They already knew that. It was at 0.5%, meaning they already expected 99.5% would not even do this as a goal. So automatically we were disadvantaged, but that's our job, is trying to hit this goal. The other is conversion. So, not only did we reach the 20% goal, but we were at 26 because we started really focusing on the words, not just that drove traffic, but words that drove conversion. And that allows us to really demonstrate what we're doing. Now, this is an example of goal completion. And sometimes when you over focus on these goals, you run into a problem where you're sometimes blinded by that goal. Now, this is a case, this is a mock-up of a screenshot that an agency showed where one of the things they were trying to do is get their href lang errors down to 0. And this was one where the client was using our tool, and so we were in with an agency, and it was he said, she said, and we saw this. It didn't look right to us. How did they get to 0 when many of the things that were wrong weren't fixed yet? And so we went into Search Console and looked at the whole report. The red box is what the agency had honed in on. Now, they were absolutely correct that the errors had went down almost to 0, but they didn't see the bigger picture. If you look to the left side of the arrow, you'll see the blue line was actually at about 300,000 href lang tags at its peak. And then follow the blue arrow, and you'll notice that as the red line, the errors were going down, so was the number of href lang tags, to the point where you had so few href lang tags that there were no errors. Now, if you don't have href lang tags, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to start getting canonical errors, which is exactly what happened. And when we tried to figure out why we were getting these errors and why the errors were going down, we realized that the agency was actually, the way that they were building the XML sitemaps using this Excel method was actually missing most of the pages, about 90%. And because 90% of the pages were missing, it was actually causing this problem. Like I mentioned, the canonical error. So Google was taking, in some cases, the UK page and showing it in Australia. And when an Australian person came into the page, they were seeing a price in British pounds, or they might be seeing something in Mexican pesos. And so the client was able to track this back, and because people were coming in and abandoned, and they knew what the normal conversion rates were, they estimated this problem cost them about $20 million. $20 million in lost sales. All because, the wrong goal was looked at, or that wasn't seeing the whole picture of the goal. And so that's an interesting challenge that we're starting to see, is that we need to stitch these things together. And so, this is something that most people overlook. Google picked a page, we got a page index, but it's not always the right page. And that's a key thing you really need to think about when you're working on sites is, is the right stuff there? The guys at OnCrawl, they actually have an interesting report that I really like, because it's when I've seen other people's audits and that very few people have honed in on this gap. And as Baratas was talking about with rendering, in many cases, Google will come get a URL and then come back and get the content from it later when they have more resources. They've gotten much better, as he told us today, at doing this, but that's really what it was. You had to tell them, because as they're trying to crawl this JavaScript site, especially on e-commerce sites where things are intertwined, they may not be picking up those URLs. And on the left side of the screen, you see a case where when OnCrawl matched the URLs that it found from the crawl to the XML sitemap, only 6.5% were in both places. So which is broken? We need to look at this. And then on the right side, it's showing that 78% of the URLs that it found, 86,000 of them weren't in the XML sitemap. So what if you add one of these JavaScript sites and you weren't telling Google all the URLs? What happens? I mean, this is where you have a problem. So this is the key thing. And I've yet to find any site where the XML sitemaps created dynamically by the CMS is within even 10% in many cases of what you might get on a crawl. And you can set your crawlers to filter out a lot of the nonsense that it may pick up that a sitemap wouldn't. But what about if it's the other way? If your crawler's not picking up that many, but the sitemap does. So you need to think about this to make sure we're getting all the pages in there. And one of these examples was, I have a good friend that he was one of my first sort of real enterprise customers. Now he dabbles on a bunch of things, and he, he knows how to get my attention. He sent me a nice bottle of scotch and a card that in it had the login credentials for his Google Search Console. He said, hey, go check out this side hustle of mine. Let me know what you think. I've got an agency, couple local guys that are working on this. I don't think they're really doing much. I just want your opinion. So when first thing I did is I obviously crawled the site. I wanted to see what I was dealing with. I went into Search Console. My crawler found 270-ish pages. According, as you see on the screen here, there was only about 70. And so this is one of the problems that we had was, where's the other 200? And I just simply created a new sitemap, cleaned up a couple errors, about less than an hour's worth of work. Those pages got indexed, so that additional 200 pages got indexed 3 times traffic. His best, 2 of his best sales days ever came within, 7 or 8 days of me doing something that simple. And this was an agency that they'd been paying, $1,000 a month to do this. So these are the kind of things that it's so simple in many cases to solve for this. He still works with them. He's obviously they're thinking about things a little differently. They've then doubled this traffic beyond what I did. So sometimes again, you need that little nudge, but focus on value creation and make sure that you're delivering performance. Ensure that you're always moving the needle. And start with that goal and work your way backwards. Just make sure that you're always delivering on that value. Another thing I want to talk about is this idea of team augmentation, using the skills of your team that it has for other services. So if you're just an SEO shop, or maybe you build websites, you have other skills. SEOs have to be, sort of jack of all trades. And so just simply ask them, is there something we can do to support you? And some of these things, can we fill in for your DevOps team? I've had people ask me, can you upload XML sitemaps for me? Can you, even blog posts, can you do this? If you have a flexible scope of work, it's money that's already allocated. So they have budget out there. And because you understand their workflow and systems, it's pretty easy for them to trust you. And sometimes if you're working with a bigger client, you might be on next 60 payments, and that's pretty appealing for them to use you, rather than try to bring back, a different contractor or even one of their full-time employees. So there's some things that you can do, I think, to let your clients know that you can be of additional services to them. And this is the case here where an SEO firm that I was talking to, they were engaged to help with the SEO part of an AEM migration. And their team and the agency team, most of them got whacked. The SEO firm said, hey, I think we can help you with that. We can help. Our guys are brilliant on the AEM infrastructure, and ended up getting a $150,000 project to backfill for both the dev agency's team and the internal team. So that was a huge win for them that they hadn't even expected, but they got it by simply raising their hand and saying, hey, can we help you? Another one of these was an SEO consultant, same thing, was doing a bunch of site migrations. These were going to happen in September, October. Just happened to say, hey, maybe we should do these now while things are slow. Your businesses are closed, so we don't, we're not going to really hurt anything. Better to do it now than when things are open back up in the fall. They love the idea. Unfortunately, their team, the agency that they were going to use to do the migration, had laid off many of their people. So they're like, well, we know how to do this. We got to fix this anyway. So, got an amazing project just by simply, showing value and additional opportunity and creativity to the client. And we talk about pivoting, and I think a lot of people had to rethink this. Something as simple as, can all my people work from home? Do we need a big office? Do we still sell the tools the way we do? And I've had a number of these in my career. And in fact, we built this amazing tool called Data Prism that I still to this day would argue is the single best sort of data mining SEO tool, or especially around keyword opportunity, that was out there. But quite honestly, we couldn't give it away because it did require a little bit of work. So we just said, look, we're not going to stress over this. Let's just shut it down. And we still believe in it, just like with hreflang. We really believe in it. And that's what I'm going to talk about, is how we've changed. But this idea is you can still believe in the vision of what you're doing, but just change how you execute against it. And in our model with hreflang, my whole premise is the last thing I wanted to do is to have another big agency with a bunch of people. I said, look, our model was do it yourself. You come in, you get a subscription, you build it, you manage it. It was as automated as could be. Agencies could come in because, quite honestly, if you're starting to deal with the bigger sites, hreflang, you uncover a ton of issues. A lot of agencies weren't scoped to handle it. Other agencies, it was a checklist item. Hey, we don't care if it's necessarily right or wrong. We just need to do one. And it's because it was coming a lot of problems. We weren't necessarily getting reoccurring revenue. We were spending a lot of time supporting people that we didn't budget to support within the rates. And internal development teams were like, we're going to build this ourselves. And so we stepped back and I asked the question that I asked about 20 years ago after the dot-com boom, when we were faced with a similar scenario. We had to lay off a bunch of our people, and we're like, well, how do we come out of this? And we asked, where do we do our best work? Who do we enjoy working with? What do we like doing? And so what we end up saying was, okay, well, we're the most successful when we're working directly with the client, with a global e-commerce manager. And that was the interesting thing, is of all the people associated with hreflang, at the end of the day, the only person that cares exponentially is the global e-commerce manager, because he or she is responsible for the performance in all the markets. The SEO team may be fractured. Localization team may really only cares about language, and dev team, well, they got a lot of things to do. And what we found is by using cross-domain hosting and saying, look, this, we'll take it, we'll do it, we'll fix it, we'll make it, we'll clean up XML sitemap errors, all that stuff. We found we could execute in 1/10 of the time over all these other methods that we thought would be better. And it was 10 to 30 times the revenue doing this. So unfortunately, we're having to build up some team. But at the end of the day, that made the most sense. It's where we could drive the most value. We had the less stress, and we had the highest profitability as a company. And so think about that. What are you doing today? And I'm seeing some people, moving away from paid back into SEO, or SEO moving into paid. Just like a lot of people had moved over into, sort of content marketing. Think about what you want to do, and what do you do best, and what are you passionate about, and how can you deliver on that? And so that's exactly where I am. So I'm in the middle of a career pivot. Like I said, I've been doing search for 25, 26 years. I just sort of had this epiphany that, look, I want to go back to my roots. I want to go back to helping companies go abroad. And so, my wife talked me into doing this graduate program, and my thesis is actually using big data to capture 1 trillion in missed opportunity through exports. And the Commerce Department and various government entities around the world have identified that, if more people actually exported that could, it's almost $1 trillion in missed opportunity. And this idea, and one of the reasons that it's a problem is that less than 1% of US companies currently export. We're the biggest exporter in the world, but only 1% of companies do it. 73% of small businesses aren't even aware of how to do it and why to do it and who to do it to. And even just a fraction of people that have stuff that's in demand today is an $81 billion in untapped opportunity. That would generate 900,000 new jobs if just those companies that already have something to export were exporting. And even in my own state, I'm in Connecticut, getting just, I think it's 20% of the companies that have an exportable product to do it would generate $1 billion in incremental revenue for the state. And that would employ almost 10,000 people. And so there's a lot of barriers into doing this. And the first of these is that all the systems are set up so that the companies, they must want to export, meaning they need to raise their hand. There's millions and millions of dollars available in systems and solutions and various services by the US government and many other governments. Japan has an amazing program called JETRO, where they're actually helping non-Japanese companies bring stuff to Japan. All these systems require you to have a target destination. Okay, I want to go here. I want to go to the UK. I want to go to Spain. That's where I want to market. I've attended a bunch of these webinars and seminars, and a lot of them are outdated, where they talk about things that don't even matter. And even the form that the export .gov has to help you start the process, starts with putting in a harmonized code, which is a code that represents some widget that you make. It's painful to even find this out, let alone being able to put it in here. And then the other crazy thing is we have a zip code. We're the only country in the world that uses zip codes. So, we need to think about why is that in there? Granted, we can use search marketing. That was my original business school thesis back in the day, was if people are searching for it and we're in search engines, we can do good things. You can use paid search. You can use Search Console to see who's coming to the site today. All these things that we know. The big problem is there's a lack of education and solutions, how to do it and why to do it. An interesting rant that I have is there's no rank tool that really easily flags incorrectly ranking countries to tell you may have an hreflang problem. Yes, you can set a PLP and it will tell you that these pages don't match the PLP, but nothing really says, hey, you've got half of your pages in Australia are from the UK. 50% of sites that have 10 or more languages don't have an hreflang in any format. And one of the things that came out of this COVID crisis is, many companies and many hospitals and states were trying desperately to find protective equipment. And they were running into things where, forms weren't working. There's actually cases where people were trying to call other countries and didn't know that you had to put the country code in, or, because many of the phone numbers weren't set up for international dial, or even that you had to go look up how to dial it because they assumed they were dealing with people in Spain, and Spain know how to call people in Spain. So these were a lot of things. And then I saw on the news where one procurement company said that about 60% of the forms that they tried to fill out either never sent the forwarded the email or did, actually sent an email, or they were broken, or they required some information that they didn't know. So all these barriers were in place to people really, making it easy to contact you. And so, the solution that I'm proposing as part of this thesis is, let's mine this, let's find these opportunities, and then sort of backtrack them into the company that offers that. And it's interesting because my first company, this earthquake preparedness company that I started when I left the Marine Corps, people only need earthquake supplies when there's an earthquake. They don't really buy them much in between earthquakes. And so to augment my business, I used to go into trade lead bulletin board sites, and somebody was looking for X, and then I'd look it up in one of the export guides and connect them. I remember one was 100 industrial batteries. And so I looked it up in the Thomas Register and found companies. I faxed them to say, hey, I need 100 of these batteries of these specifications. What's the price? And then I would basically throw my letterhead on that and send it to the person who was requesting it and take a piece of it. And so that's one thing I'm trying to get back to is how do we do that in 2020? And so, I think there's a lot of things that we can do that are outside of some of the core stuff we've done. And it just requires us to think a little more clearly about what we want to do, why we're doing it, and if possible, how can we help other people when we do it? So wrapping up, the 3 big takeaways is really always show them the money. Try to deliver value in everything that you do. Don't be afraid to pivot. There's been many, many, many great pivots. Think about what makes sense for you, what makes sense, for your team. And then lastly, look globally. There's an insane amount of opportunity outside of the US or outside of your market. And just start small. Start with a market, take a look around, just explore it. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to look globally. So thank you very much for your attention and spending your time. Sincerely, thank you. This may be, it's highly likely, one of my last search marketing related presentations, because I said I'm making this pivot. So while it was very, very painful to use the technology to get this going, hopefully you got a lot out of it. And I look forward to potentially having a cocktail somewhere around the world with you, and best of luck and all the best in all of your digital endeavors. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. That was great stuff. So
Great,
before we dive in the Q&A, I just found actually a little memento from our previous happy hour that we've had together in the world of search marketing. For those of you that don't know, this is the original Absolute Helix copper pineapple glass that can be, what's the name of the official drink, Bill?
It's the Helix, I think it's the Helix pineapple. Yeah.
Yeah. So go to your favorite, once things open up, go to your favorite bar and restaurant. But then once you, and request, but yeah, the cup goes directly on top of this, and it's unused, by the way, which I'm a little bit sad about, but it's gonna stay on my shelf for a long time now. So anyway, that's my happy hour tribute for today.
Cool. I should have brought mine. We could have had a cocktail.
Yeah, I'm sure we've maybe lost one component of this cup from time to time over the years. So let's get started, shall we? One really interesting question that came up, and you and I were just kind of talking about this a little bit backstage earlier, is in your presentation you really discussed a lot about how to take that granular SEO mindset and grow it, not only for yourself but on the client side as well, and really show your value at the end of the day. One question that came in is, should you do projections and forecasting right now in the world of COVID? And do you have any tips on how to do that and how to set expectations when really at the end of the day, it's a question mark?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's tough. I mean, still I'm, known for this thing we call it the missed opportunity matrix. And it was basically, a model that I pulled out of the air to try to convince people at IBM to do this. And I would just say, look at it and see what's the query volume. And then what percentage do we think we can get? And I think most of us know what you can get for branded terms, non-branded terms. And then I make projections off of that. And then we don't make it a final, etched in stone, but we use it as, we used to call this a no bullshit report. And that's what the clients called it. It's like, look, I can look at this report and you can tell me if we're on track or not. Because we won the business by presenting a model that said we can do X for you. And sometimes you have to take that risk and try to do it. And so, yes, you were going to see query volumes for things like, hotels in Vegas or something are radically declined. But if you normalize that data to when it was there, then I think we can use it as a guide. So, we're not saying you're absolutely going to get this, but the interesting thing is most companies have these waterfall documents already for other forms of media. And all I used to do is try to co-op them. So if you got one for email or you got one for TV or Facebook, and it says, if we bring this many people, we engage this many, we get this type of lift. And I would work backwards from that, saying if we can capture this amount of share, and this is what it's going to take to do it, it would allow us to deliver on that. So anything is better than just saying, yeah, we can get you some additional traffic.
And one thing that's been a challenge during COVID is, like, while some in the travel space, traffic and sales have obviously gone down, in hospitality, in some spaces they've skyrocketed. Right. So that's another thing. Like, I know in my case, I have one client where we do their online e-commerce, but then they have bricks and mortars. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that brick and mortar traffic or sales intent carried over to online, right? Yeah. So right now we're looking at great numbers for the past 3 months, but I have to keep in the back of my head, what happens when the stores open again? What happens when the consumer confidence level increases? What happens when people aren't afraid to go out and can go in a mask at a time or whatever it may be to make that purchase? So I'm constantly looking, and to make things even more of a challenge, their rankings have gone up during this time too. So they're bringing on a lot more unbranded as well, right? So constantly looking at seeing the brick and mortar rebound, and in a way that's been able to get us more data than we had previously. So we're actually having learnings coming from the behavior of the brick and mortar customers, from the foot traffic, from those sales, to really make not only SEO better at the end of the day, but the ability to communicate those wins better up the ladder.
And I think that's a key thing, right? So, can we keep the momentum? So because maybe people couldn't come in, but they wanted to buy from us, can we still convince them, like take a do-it-yourself store? In my case, I still will often look for things online and then buy it and then go pick it up in the store, because I don't necessarily need them to drive it 5 blocks to my house. Mm-hmm. They could, because I can physically go in. So can we keep that momentum and really retrain them in a way to use the online, where we're reducing the cost of the physical store, but still make it easy for people to get it? And you mentioned the data. We've got one client that the traffic has went through the roof, and we put a dozen different, click tracking things to use this increase of data to really tell us, really drill into, like, what do they want when they come in for this? Are they one-click wonders? Are they doing, what's the channel they're going down? And do we have people that are putting stuff in a basket and then, want to deliver it? So I think, it's going to train us to look at data. The one thing I want to mention is, at some point, that's the beauty about search, is that these are people that explicitly want something. They may not want to take a Vegas hotel or do a cruise or do something and travel today, but doesn't mean that, when this changes, they're still going to look for it. And I've seen people, and I actually referenced one of these where an SEO consultant did a pretty big project for helping somebody migrate while it was a downtime. So I think people that have leveraged that downtime have been really good. So I think, look at your data. Another crazy thing is I saw people pulling their stores offline, especially some international stores, because they couldn't fulfill. But they took the whole store down, which meant they lost the rankings, and they're going to claw their way back in. And I think those are some crazy things that came out of this.
And there's also that funnel acquisition trail, which sometimes is not attributed to SEO at all.
Right.
It's the ability to grow that audience, to grow that email list, right? To have this email list saying, hey, here are 20,000 people that want to go on a cruise when things open back up. Right. And how did they come? Well, they found the site, via searching for, discount cruises or whatnot. So there is that opportunity, and there are opportunities outside of what's happening right now within Google Analytics to jump on. So the KMEA report. How does one do it if you're not doing direct sales?
Well, so, one of the things you mentioned is search contribute to revenue. So we used to use at IBM, we sold things that we didn't necessarily, it might be 18 months, 24 months, we couldn't tie revenue to it. So we called it search influenced revenue. So like you said, did that new customer that went into your email funnel, was the first entry and engagement with you come from SEO? And you just simply tag that. And so if that in people have these crazy Salesforce systems, and one of the things we would do is, especially with paid, because we lost our keyword data, but now we can do it using paid. But we try to find some way that if they came from search, especially organic search or paid search, tag that person when they fill out your lead form as coming from search. And if that's the first contact, and it's normally overwritten when it goes into Salesforce because now Salesforce gets credit. But if you keep that the first time that this person engaged with you came from search, and use this creative term called search influenced revenue, you can back into that. And we made cases in the billions that search ultimately had influences. Now we have to take our piece of the final pie, but we at least wanted to make sure that we showed that we influenced this, especially further down the funnel. That somebody did this query and came in and engaged us, and even simply asking them on the phone, how did you hear about us? And say, oh, I found it in Google. Well, they would tag it as Google, and we could attribute all that revenue back to at least search influence revenue.
Often overlooked.
Very overlooked. Nobody asked them. They asked them, how'd you find us? Say, Google. Okay, thank you. They don't ask, what keyword did you use? One more field in that call center database can be a tremendous amount of insight directly from people.
Yep, exactly. What keyword did you use? What did you search for? Even if people don't know the exact term, they're going to make something up, and that's going to represent the topic matter that they're looking for, right? So, right. Yeah, agreed. Here's a question that comes in from Rajdeep. How do you convince some of the bigger companies that you give access to make these big impact changes? Like, how do you convince that you're the agency or you're the company that can make this big impact change to your clients versus them giving it to their in-house team at the end of the day to complete the task?
So I'm going to answer this two ways. So the first way is the cop-out that, 26 years in this business, working with probably 90% of the Fortune 100 with proven track record of billions of dollars in revenue, that gets me in the door. That gives me the keys to the store in many cases. The second piece is that try not to compete against those teams. How do you collaborate with them? Too many times I see SEOs come in, because I'm often in these meetings as a strategist, and they come in, tell them, hey, what you're doing is all wrong, and I've done this audit, and they never ask why you do anything, and you immediately sort of are at odds with these teams. Instead of, if you come in and say, again, the whole idea of keep my ass employed report was, our job as an agency was to make this person's metrics jump off the chart. And so how do you do that with internal teams? You got to empower internal teams. 9 times out of 10, my job is nothing more than being the third party voice of reason that reiterates whatever they said. And the first question I ask every project I work on is, what have you been telling management that they haven't listened to? And if I agree with it, that's the first things that get weaved onto the very first presentation is exactly that. I reaffirm them. Then you become a friend to them as opposed to becoming an enemy.
Absolutely. No one wants to hear right off the get-go everything that's wrong.
Right.
But how can you help? And then once you can help those teams convince management to approve that change, then there's your value right there, exactly. Right? For all involved. Okay, we got 5 minutes left already. Wow, this is going by quick. Adding to that question, Travis McKnight asks, what are your recommendations for client who ask you for feedback on specific projects, pages, etc., and then ignore your advice and move forward with resolutions that are not in their best interest? So they've asked you, but they move forward and do something completely backwards.
I mean, again, the cop-out answer is, did the check clear? So if you got paid, then you've done your job. The second part of that, the honest part is that you probably didn't two things. Either you didn't understand the barrier that they had and articulate well enough how to overcome that barrier to get the outcome you wanted. You didn't change the hearts and minds. You didn't change the culture, the process, the roadmap. So they went ahead with their own. The other thing you can do coming out of that is just show, again, if you had any kind of projections going in, you can show the cost of not doing that. And I've done that many a time, saying, look, you implemented this piece and it actually cost us rankings. And because I can track things down to a page level, I can show cause and effect. But number one is, try to articulate very clearly using their infrastructure what needs to be changed. Don't tell them they need a new CMS. Figure out how to do it within their CMS.
Got you. Excellent. Okay, this is more of a technical SEO oriented question. Google Search Console is adding more and more errors on a daily basis, right? They've added Core Web Vitals this week. Not too long ago, speed was added as a more of a warning, but now it's 100% legit as an error internally. Are they important? Is monitoring those errors on the GSC side really an important way to spend time?
So I'm going to give you the two answers. If I wasn't sort of moving away from search, I would say don't even look at it, because that's a tremendous amount of revenue for me coming in and fixing that when people don't want to do it. The second real answer is, why is Google telling us this? Why would they waste their resources to give us this information? And I think that's what's important, is that I even take people in when I'm starting a project and show them what's in Search Console and say, number one is coverage. So that's the indexability. So all the stuff Veritas was talking about, rendering and indexing, and nobody gives a shit about indexing because it's not cool or sexy. That's the number one thing Google gives us after performance. So I think if they've taken the time to give us a report to show good or bad, we should take advantage of that data and try to improve it. Because if it's good, we've ticked the box that at least we've made the Google happy. If it sucks, then they're telling us it sucks. And even more importantly, the order that they tell us that it sucks, in many cases, is the order of magnitude of benefit to you. Especially with things like broken pages and stuff. They often sort that 1 through 1,000. The 1,000, if it's not necessarily the day, it's the importance. So what page may have value that's broken? And I'm seeing one critical one is when I come in and I see that you have 10 times more errors than you have pages indexed, you clearly are wasting Google's time. And the more you can reduce that error load, the better. The more you're not wasting Google's time, that they could spend it on other things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of the first places I started. And then now we're going to start seeing organic reporting over in Merchant Center as well, which is exciting. But I just wonder if that's going to open up a whole new can of worms in terms of, I mean, we have our product feed errors and stuff like that within GSC, but it's in a way, it's expanding what SEO is responsible for.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Well,
right?
It's a way to communicate it. I mean, this is like with the core report, right? It in one regard, it has nothing to do with us, right? But in a way, it has everything to do with us, because I honestly believe Google is using the desire to rank well in Google as a way to change the entire web development industry, to build websites that actually work for people instead of pimping whatever you're pimping. So if you think about it, if you got something that loads like crap, that's a bad user experience. Yep. And if they can flag it in Search Console, it gets a SEO's attention, and they can wave that flag and say, this is bad. And so I think that's one of these things that we want to think about.
The amazing thing is, I remember it was just a few years ago, we were all complaining that Google wasn't giving us any information. Right? Now I'll wake up in the morning complaining that my inbox is full of Google Search Console warnings, but then I'll be like, oh, this is what I asked for. This is what we asked for. So it's funny. All right. Well, that wraps things up, Bill. It's really been a pleasure. to have you on. Could we get a little bit of confirmation on the acronym KMAE? I there's two meanings.
Yeah, there's two meanings. So the one that we show to management is Keyword Maximization and Effectiveness Report. And then the code name is sort of Keep My Ass Employed. So it's showing the e-commerce number or whatever the boss says you have to hit is what we're trying to solve for. So two names, two different audiences.
Nice. Love it. So again, thanks a lot. It's been really a pleasure. So speaking of audiences, we have something in store for all of you today. But I'd just like to give everybody on the SEJ team a round of applause. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not right now. Along with all of you that have stuck around. It's not very often we put together a 10.5-hour event for those who've been working on it, 12-hour event. So it's been quite a day. And yeah, we're really happy with the way things have gone and with those of you that have participated. So fantastic. Everything from our speakers down to our side sessions, down to those of you that participated in networking. It's been amazing. So we really hope that you enjoyed yourself. And moving forward, you feel equipped to take these SEO, social media, paid search, content marketing, and then the ability to speak not only to your Java developers and dev teams from Bartosz's and Martin's presentations earlier today, but to be able to speak to C-suite and the VIPs from Bill's presentation and so your value, and really bundle that into some core takeaways. But just to let you guys know, we're not really going anywhere right now. So coming up is going to be a very special DJ set brought to you by Lily Ray, who's going to be joining the stage again. Lily is going to be DJing to help to build awareness and donations to the Voices